On today's installment of FAQ U, we explore the question that every young shred-eye knight asks himself at some point. How do you know what scale to use over a riff or chord progression? Let's talk about that. Well, hey there kids, it's your good buddy, Uncle Ben. In all my many years as a guitar teacher, one of the questions I get asked the most is this: is lasagna a type of parfait? And the answer is yes. But probably the second most asked question that I get is, how do you know what scale to use when you're improvising or writing a guitar solo? The truth of the matter is there's a lot of different approaches and all of them are correct. And in this video I'm going to show you guys a couple of cool ideas and approaches that'll hopefully lend some creativity to your own playing. For this lesson I'm going to be using a backing track that I created here at home that was mixed and mastered by my good buddy Eric Hill over at Blue Room Recording Studios. Hit him up for all your audio needs. He's absolutely fantastic. And this backing track is going to be available to everybody who supports my channel over on my Patreon page at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. Even for just $1 a month, you get a full download of this high quality backing track that's over 6 minutes long. That way you can practice the ideas and concepts we're going to talk about today. Plus you get access to a ton of bonus lessons, other backing tracks, downloadable tabs, and so much more. So don't delay, click the Patreon link in the video description below and sign up today. Thanks. You're cool. The first step to making the right melodic choices in your soloing is just to sit back and listen to what's going on around you. So let me play you the first section of the backing track here while you enjoy some very adorable footage of my boy Turkey chewing on a bone. Okay, so nothing super complicated is going on right there. This isn't like giant steps or something like that. We got the guitars that are just strumming a sustained chord while the bass line underneath there moves around a little bit. Now what you got to take into account is every note that is being played by all the instruments, whether it's guitar, bass, Bavarian cheese whistle, whatever it is. Every note that's being played is a permission for you to use that note in your soloing. And your job as the soloist is to take every bit of harmonic information that's being offered to you from the chords and the riffs or whatever to start constructing a cool melodic language that you can use to solo on top of it. First thing, let's talk about that bass line that's kind of driving everything behind it and see what we can gather from that. So that bass riff gave us permission to use A, G, which intervallically would be a flat 7. Really important to think about this stuff in terms of intervals, but even if you're kind of new to that and you just want to use notes, that's fine too. So A, G, and then the high note in the bass riff is a C. So now we have a 3-note melodic vocabulary that the bass has written for us. A, G, and C. So 3 notes, that's not really a whole lot to use while soloing. So what we're going to have to do is to fill in the blanks in between those notes to create something a little bit more extensive that we can use. This always reminds me of that part in Jurassic Park where they're talking about how they have like the gaps in the Dino DNA and they fill it in with like frog DNA and stuff. This is kind of like that, only hopefully less disastrous, usually. So every basic major or minor scale is made up of 7 notes, and every one of those basic major or minor scales is going to use all 7 letters of the musical alphabet. So there's going to be some kind of A in every scale, some kind of B, some kind of C, D, E, F, and G. Those are going to be in all your basic scales and modes. Now, that 3-note combination that the bass gave us only gave us 3 of those. We have the A, we don't have anything in place for the B, we have the C filled in, we don't have a D yet, we don't have an E yet, we don't have any kind of F in this yet, but we do have a G. So our harmonic language is starting to be formed. Now, every guitar player's favorite move whenever they're given a kind of limited amount of harmonic information like that is just to fill in the blanks with the good old-fashioned minor pentatonic scale, right? If I play A minor pentatonic, it's going to use all 3 of those notes that we have, plus fill in a couple of the other gaps. Check this out. It has an A, it has a C, a D, an E, there's that G note, and then we're back at A again. So it satisfies everything that the bass riff already has in it, plus fills in the gap with some other cool stuff. Not exactly the most interesting thing in the world, but it'll get the job done. And I have to mention too, it's not just this A, this C, this D, this E, this G, and this A that are going to work. I can use those notes anywhere on the neck, which is what you're going to see whenever I start moving around a little bit. It might look like I'm diverging off from the standard minor pentatonic scale shape, but I'm always going to be using those same 5 notes no matter where I am. So a pretty basic sound, right? We're taking the information that was given to us and filling in the blanks as minimally as we can, and you end up with stuff that sounds very meat and potatoes, right? It's just kind of predictable rock guitar player kind of stuff. Now let's take a look at the additional information that the guitars are giving us, because again, every note in that sustained chord is a permission slip for us to use that note while we're soloing. The chord that the guitars are holding out right there is an A sus2 chord, or A suspended second. Now, even if you don't know what all is in that chord, you could even attach a tuner to your headstock and go through that note by note and discover what notes are in there. But you'd have an A, which we already have, an E note, again, that agrees with our minor pentatonic scale, another A note, and then a new guy, the B note that's in the chord. That's the sus2, or second of the scale. Then you have another E. So basically, that chord right there gave us permission to also interject a B note in there, right? Let's take that minor pentatonic framework that we had and interject the new second or ninth, the B note. That right there is a minor hexatonic scale. If you listen to like Eric Johnson or Joe Bonamassa, you've heard those guys use that all the time. It's what lets them play like familiar bluesy feeling positions without sounding just so stock and so boring, you know? Adding in that second or ninth really adds a lot of color in, and again, we can do that because the chord said we could. Let's fire up that backing track again and check out what that hexatonic scale is going to sound like over that progression. Like you heard right there, we get some really cool sounds whenever we add in what I call the German interval, the 9, right? Kind of makes it sound a little less bluesy, a little less straightforward, but still super melodic because it's agreeing with everything that's happening in the chord progression and riff behind it. So like I said, every basic major and minor scale and mode has 7 notes in it, right? And what we've gathered so far has provided most of that information. We found an A, a B, and a C in the riff there. Nobody told us we couldn't play a D note, so we put one in when we put in that minor pentatonic scale. We had an E in the chord. We didn't have any kind of F yet, though. That's interesting. And we did find a G right there, so that provides most of our harmonic information. But what about that missing note right there, right? The chords and the riffs and stuff aren't telling us what kind of F is needed. And we all know it's really important to find exactly the right kind of F that you need. So let's take the information that we have so far and add in an F note. That's going to give us A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. That gives us an A minor scale, or as some of the fancy pants may know it, the A Aeolian mode. Again, we chose that F note because nobody told us that we couldn't. Let's see how that thing sounds. It's probably going to give us a lot more, I'm going to say straightforward minor scale kind of sound. It's going to sound more sadder. So it's really cool just to hear how much tension changing that one note in there adds. That F note really did give us a more dark, kind of minor tonality. But I will say, I think that minor scale sounds kind of like a predictable choice, and that sort of one-dimensional sadness that you get out of that isn't necessarily my thing. Now, what if we took that missing F note and replaced it with an F sharp instead? What would we have then? We'd have A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, and A. Again, I'm free to use that F sharp. Nobody told me that I couldn't. And it sounds really cool in there. That gives you something called an A Dorian scale. Some people think of that as being like a minor scale with a raised 6. Some people call it the second mode of the G major scale. Just don't call it late for dinner and you're good to go. I call that the Santana minor scale. It just kind of has that sort of Latin jazz sound to it. It's still minor sounding, but it's a little less severely sad than the regular minor scale. Sounds really cool. It blends great with the minor pentatonic. I think you'll dig how this one sounds. Let's check it out. That's just a cooler sound. Maybe you disagree, and this is where our melodic taste and our personality as players really develops. What do you choose to fill in the gaps with? That's what's going to make you sound like you and Francis Bubble Trousers sound like the greatest guitar player in the world, as we all know. But interestingly enough, with more chords comes less possibilities. Let's talk about the second section of this jam track here, which introduces a couple of new chords into the mix. Our big dog Zora is in the studio with me now, so enjoy listening to this section of the track while you check out the Cuddle Cam footage. You heard that section introduced a couple of new chords. We have F major, G major, A minor, and then back to G major. And again, there's ways just to look at that set of chords and know exactly what key it belongs to. But for the interest of this video, let's again kind of look at that note bank sort of idea. If we look at the notes contained in those chords, our F major is going to contain F, A, C. Our G major is going to have 3 notes in it, G, B, D. Our A minor is going to have A, C, and E in it. Between those 3 chords, that spells out the entire 7-note A minor scale that we see right here. We had some kind of A, some kind of B, some kind of C, D, E, F, and G that we harvested from all of those chords. So that means there's not actually that many options of what we can play with right here because there's no gaps in the sequence, right? Every note in there is filled in. The most interesting thing we can do at this point is to play the A minor scale over all that. That's cool. Or we could even poke some notes out of it to take us back to a more simple like minor pentatonic scale, or even just back to that hexatonic scale like we used earlier. Or you can just mix them all up and use them at your own discretion. You don't have to just like pick one and stick to it the whole time. You can go in and out of all these different scales the entire time that you're playing. So like I said, with all that harmonic information from the chords, there's just not that many possibilities of what we can do over it, outside of throwing in a few like chromatic passing tones if you want to sound fusiony, or even just using that like, you know, E flat blues scale note in there as kind of a passing tone. You can kind of decorate it, but the house is pretty much already built. Now obviously this is a pretty basic example. We're not playing over like Countdown or Proto-Cosmos or some kind of crazy like jazz fusion tune or something like that. But I think that looking at things this way, as far as like look what's around you and fill in the gaps with whatever you can, whatever you think sounds cool, that's where you're going to get your individuality from. I think that that's just kind of a good start to start looking at some riffs and things like that. Like for example, a lot of metal riffs, you know, just kind of those pedal tone. Riffs like that, that's just a 3-note bank. All that that's providing you is E, D, and F. That's all. Then the rest of that scale is up for you to determine. Marty Friedman goes crazy and fills in the gaps with all kinds of bizarre stuff, whereas somebody like, I don't know, Joe Satriani might do something a little bit more straightforward and melodic, like the E Phrygian scale or something. If you take one thing from this lesson, it's learn how to fill in the gaps with interesting stuff. Of course, doing that requires a little bit of knowledge of the fretboard, but just gives you a good excuse to learn those notes more better. I've got a great Patreon lesson on how to learn the notes on the board, and it can be yours, along with this awesome backing track that was mixed and mastered by Eric Hill over on my Patreon page, just for $1 a month or more if you feel so generous. So be sure to head on over to patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars and sign up today. It'd make me real happy if you did. Thanks for liking this video and subscribing. Be sure to ring the bell for notifications every time I upload a new slice of fried gold right here for you guys. Well, it's been fun as always, but it's time to jet and head over to the gymnasium. As for you, grab that backing track off the Patreon page and get to jamming. Less clicking, more picking.